in today's video, I wanted to talk about some of my favorite Southern writers. I always feel like I'm like an honorary Southern person because both of my parents were born in Louisiana. They were born in a small town called Alexandria, Louisiana. In fact, when my dad retired, he moved back to his hometown, which I could never live there. That is the smallest, dull town. They close stores at 8 o'clock at night. Having my grandmother and my aunts talk about, their town and just everything about it. It was so entertaining, okay? But again, I think having parents that are from the South and so many family members, I always feel like, I know all the customs, I know the sayings and everything. Let's just get started with the books. So first, let's start with I want to say newer authors because a lot of the ones that I do have, they're authors that are either deceased or they wrote back in the 70s, 80s, 90s type. So, okay, first I would say one of my favorites is Tari Jones. Now, Tari Jones, she's known for An American Marriage. This was an Oprah Book Club pick back in 2018. And I have read all of her books except her first book, which is called Leaving Atlanta. It's talking about the child murders. And I'm hesitant to read that because y'all know how I feel about children being, hurt. And then when you add a black child into that mix, yeah, so I'm again hesitant to read that, but I do have it. I like the way that Tari Jones writes. I did start off with this book, and I remember after I read this book, I wanted to read Silver Sparrow. And I like this book about, two families. One of them knows about one, the other one doesn't. Next is Daniel Black. Now, when I was doing my research, he was a native, they said, of Kansas City, but he spent his formative years in Arkansas, and then he went to Clark Atlanta, and all his books are set in the South. They're set in Arkansas, and this was the first book I read by him, Perfect Peace. If y'all have not read Perfect Peace, y'all need to get on it ASAP. This book is not like anything I have read before, and oh, it's so many nuggets in this book and so many metaphors. And I remember after I read this book, I came across an interview, and he did dig and excavate the book, and oh, I wish I could tell you guys, but after reading this, I'm like, oh, I'm reading all his works. So I end up buying. This actually was one of our unsung black book club picks, and we loved it. After I read this, I wanted to read his latest book, which was called Don't Cry for Me. First of all, I love the cover. Look at this. It's like a young man. This is a son, and then this is the father. But I recently learned that there is a book that's coming out next year, and it is you're going to get more of the son's perspective, which is Isaac. So I can't wait to read that. In the cover, oh my gosh, it's so pretty. Okay, so next we're going to talk about some older authors. First is Richard Wright. And I would say, first of all, you got to get your mind right. It's going to deal with inequality of black men. And in particular, this book, Lord, it's a lot. And I would have to say, it was a laborious, and I would say, I don't want to give it away, but that later part of the book, oh my gosh, it was like, would you please hurry up, sir? Please, please, please. And the things that Bigger does, it's like, ooh, yeah. Uh, I felt sorry for him, but at the same time, it's like, how could you even come up with doing what you did? There is several movies of, this book. I would say, I remember there was one with Richard Wright actually playing Bigger. And there's another one in the 80s with Oprah Winfrey. And there is another one that came out a couple years ago. I remember it was on HBO. I think I preferred that one a little bit better. It was slightly different at the end, but there was no good to come out of it. It wasn't a happy ending. With this book, there's not a happy ending. So I remember I wanted to read this. I wanted to read Black Boy. He's also known for that. But I said I wanted to read his first novel, which is Uncle Tom's Children. It is a collection of short stories. And it took me a long time to get through this. I think this is on my TBR for last year. And I said, okay, I have read two of his well-known books. I read his first novel. I don't need to read anything else of his. I honestly don't have a desire to read anything else of his. But I would say if you do want to read Richard Wright, I would start with either Native Son or Black Boy, because those are classics. And yeah, I would say start with those. Okay, next is one of my favorite authors, and that is Maya Angelou. Now, of course, Maya is from Arkansas. We all know I Know Where the Caged Bird Sings. I remember this is the first book I read on my own and loved every minute of it. I have several copies of this book, of this edition, because it has a foreword by Oprah Winfrey. And if you guys know anything about Oprah, she loved and adored Maya and vice versa. So I really wanted to get this edition. But I would say my favorite book of hers, my favorite autobiography of hers, probably is, it's a tie between The Heart of a Woman and, is it The Heart of a Woman? Yeah, and A Song Flung Up to Heaven. I remember I read this when I was a sophomore, and it was like, oh my gosh, loved every minute of it. And then 2 years ago, I went to go back and read her whole, catalog when it comes to her autobiographies, and I realized as an adult, I like this one because it's talking about the aftermath of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. She was friends with them, and she was actually supposed to help and go to Ghana and really help the cause of Malcolm X, and he got assassinated. And she talks about the aftermath. She talks about how at one point she was, didn't like whites. She just generalized them, and she overcame that. It also talks about her relationship with her son Guy as he has gotten older, and just how she navigated being, a single mother. At one point, she talks about her marriage. This book is just everything. I mean, I love all of her autobiographies, but I would say after I Know Where the Caged Bird Sings, these two are my favorite. Next is Tennessee Williams. I am a fan of Tennessee Williams. I would say I am not really into plays, but I really, really liked his plays. In particular, I love The Glass Menagerie. Oh, and I think also the reason why I love this is because my aunt, who was an English teacher and drama teacher, she loved and talked about this book so much. The end, oh, I love that scene. For nowadays in the world is lit by lighting. Blow out your candle, Laura, and say goodbye. Oh, you guys have to read it in order to get this. Now, I do have A Streetcar Named Desire by him. Now, I've seen the movie. I have not read this play, and I need to read it because I did enjoy the movie. I'm into old Hollywood movies, and I remember back in my early 20s, mid 20s, I really got into old Hollywood movies, like, girl, watching them back, okay? But like I said, I really did enjoy the movie, so I know I'll probably really will enjoy the play. Next is a recent author that I discovered, and he took up all of my January and February. And I talked about him so much on my channel, and that is Truman Capote. I knew of Truman Capote, but I remember I only knew him for In Cold Blood. And I remember I had learned that he had written Breakfast at Tiffany's. I did not know that that was based on a book. And I remember seeing the movie, and the movie, it's okay. It's a one and done. I like the wardrobe of that movie. But after watching the series on FX that came out earlier this year in January, I wanted to learn so much more about him, and I wanted to read his writings. And when I tell you, this man can tell a story. He messy as all get up in his personal life, but he could tell a story, okay? And this is the one that got me. This is what caused all of just him spiraling down, because he told his friend's business. And it's in this. It was 3 short stories. It was supposed to be a whole novel. And because of the fallout and him being excommunicated from his elite circle, he didn't finish the book. But they were stories published in Esquire magazine. And then later, when he passed, they put the 3 stories in a collection. And this is one of the collections. And yeah. You see, I got it tabbed and highlighted. And like I said, I wanted to read A Breakfast at Tiffany's. This is way different than the one in the movie. The one in the movie is very sophisticated. This one is not. Next, I would say, of course, Alice Walker, The Color Purple. This is one of my favorite books by her. I also like her short stories. And my favorite is this collection, You Can't Keep a Good Woman Down. And then I remember after I read Color Purple, I read it twice. I wanted to read a little bit more of her works, not just The Color Purple. And I read this, which is By the Light of My Father's Smile. If I'm being honest, I didn't really enjoy this. First of all, the beginning scene, it's a very um I don't want to use the term vulgar, but it's a very explicit sex scene. It was like, oh girl, Lord. I mean, she put Zane to shame, okay? And you have a man that is looking over his daughters or in his family. He's seeing everything that they do. And when I say everything that they do in the privacy of their homes and the way that she writes it, it's just like, But again, I wanted to read something other than, The Color Purple. I mean, Alice Walker's a GOAT. That writing is unbelievable. And I mean, she's known for The Color Purple, and you can see why, because that story is just, it's beyond brilliant. The fact that they've made movies and Broadway shows and a recent musical. I mean, it's like people can't get enough of that story. That's why it keeps on just, going and going and going. Lastly is Ernest J. Gaines. I read all of his works, 2 years ago. These are all of his books. And I would say my favorite probably was, it's a tie between Miss Jane Pittman, and I do like the movie with Cicely Tyson. And then I kind of liked his first book, which is Catherine, is it Cormar, I believe. And Buddy Sims, The Tragic Life of Buddy Sims was very interesting too. But with his works, it's going to talk about the injustice of Black men. And it's always in the South. It's in particularly Louisiana, because that's where he is from. He actually recently just died. But his stories, if you do want to get into the mindset of a Black man, a Black Southern man, you need to read him, because you feel everything that he writes. That's how well he writes. When I read all his works, girl, I felt like I was a Black man, okay, in this world, because that's how he makes you feel. His writing is so particular. It's so detailed without being over detailed. His characters are well rounded. And all his characters and all his stories are different. Now, he is known for A Lesson Before Dying. This is incredible. But like I said, I do really like these 3 books of his. And if you are starting out with his writings, I do think you should probably read A Lesson Before Dying. But if you do want to read not like his popular book and want to kind of be different from everyone, I would say his first book. Yeah. Look at these covers of these editions. Aren't they pretty? And I got these for cheap. I got this for $3.50 from Second and Charles. But I just love these covers. So yeah, guys, that is it for some of my favorite Southern writers. I will also put a documentary that I watched on YouTube. It's several of them where it's Black and white writers, and really did enjoy those. I learned about some new authors from those documentaries and ended up buying some of their books. So yeah, I will put that down in the description box. But that's all I have for you guys, and I'll be back with more Black books.